So powering the hybrid workforce, let's start over with this. Um, all of us have had this massive navigation going from work from home to working in the office. And so our new challenge moving forward, Craig and I were just talking about this, is powering the hybrid workforce, how we're going to power our work moving forward, and how we're going to manage and navigate through teams. One of the interesting things that's happening in our industry right now is that we're seeing a proliferation of business. We're seeing business come back. Through that, have we had enough time to adjust? If we haven't had enough time to adjust and change how we manage our teams, now is the time for us to make some changes to our businesses. I was mentioning this earlier. This is the study by the Brookings Institute that shows what's happened in the US. Already before the pandemic, there was a plummeting of per office square feet per worker. So we'd already seen the office shrinking. What's changed over the past year is before 2020, 3% of the US labor force worked remotely. And now 42% of the labor force is working remote. So huge changes that's happened, as we all know. What's going to happen moving forward? All of the studies, including Gartner and others, show that remote work is going to remain a cornerstone of the post-pandemic future of work. So remote work, as we all know, is here to stay. The question for us is really not whether it's going to stay, it's how to manage hybrid teams moving forward. IT exec at Walmart said that working virtual will be the new normal. Also, Shopify, I love the phrase that the CEO of Shopify called it, the office centricity is over. And that Quora's CEO had a really cool open letter to their team. I think it was a team of 200 to 300 employees. I forget their revenues. I think they might 100 million revenue or something like that, but it may be high. They had he'd said that our headquarters in the future will be in the cloud. And this is to sort of democratize the workforce in the sense of folks that were either working in an office or working at home. So lots of changes happening still as we move forward. 1 in 5 employees in 2020 voluntarily changed employers. More than half of those were Gen Z and millennials. And the number one reason that they changed was because of the work from anywhere or workplace flexibility. We all sort of knew this heading into the pandemic, that workplace flexibility, according to most research studies, had outpaced benefits and even salary in terms of the number one benefit, health benefits and salary in terms of the number one benefit that employees sought from employers moving forward. So you could say that work from anywhere and workplace flexibility are now the new health benefits that we've seen over the past probably 10 or 20 years. And one study I wanted to bring to everyone's attention today, most of the studies that we discovered were highly positive about this shift working home, meaning productivity, the idea of bringing work-life harmony, not work-life balance. Balance, as we all know, is impossible to achieve, but harmony is getting closer to what we can achieve in terms of our work life. But there's one recent study put out, and Adam Grant pointed this study out, where I saw it. 10,000 professionals. This is a study done by the Economics Institute at the University of Chicago. The reason why this is an important study for us is because it's one of the largest studies that we've seen in terms of working remote, because it involved 10,000 IT professionals, most of which were college educated, and most of which were doing not just like developing work, but they're doing all kinds of work, client work, research work. Very similar, I think, to our industry in this regard. But what I want to show you is what happened to a lot of these employees as they shifted from and purely in office to then working from home into this sort of hybrid model that the company had. So keep in mind, 10,000 professionals, and they did a very rich study on their work habits. What happened was through mid-March 2020, you're going to see this dividing line through the presentation. You're going to see folks that suddenly went to work from home. What happened was their working hours started steadily increasing. Okay, that was one change that they saw. And keep in mind, this study is going, was 17 months before March, and this study went through September, October in the fall of last year. So the numbers are steadily increasing. Working hours were increasing per employee. Now, I'm bringing this up for a very important point we'll get to in a minute. But not only did working hours increase, but after hours work increased as well. So we saw this change happen with our workforce too, that after hours work increased as well. What happened with these IT professionals too was that their amount of focused hours declined. And the reason the amount of focused hours declined, what they saw as they're studying all of the work with these IT professionals was that they could see, based on 2-hour blocks of productivity time, whether they were in meetings or whether they were working. And since the study was a data set from 17 months before and then after, they were able to see the transition. What they found was what replaced highly productive work was more collaboration. Now, we tend to use the word collaboration in a very positive sense. In this sense, it can be somewhat negative in that, of course, there was an adjustment to the work from home period, but this indicates that this was more than an adjustment. This was the new challenge that we have as we're coaching and leading our teams going forward, is this challenge of working more hours, working after hours, losing our focus, and then more collaboration. Which there's some contrast with a lot of these studies. I bring this one up because it's one of the most important for us to look at as you as a leader are leading your team. I think many of you have had this struggle where you have some employees that are doing incredibly well, thriving in this work hybrid model, and then some other employees are struggling. So wherever you're at in the spectrum of your work, I wanted to give you an idea of kind of what's happened with the average employee as we've all moved forward. Another report I think that's really important is the State of Remote report from Buffer. And that is that they did a research study of 2,000 or 3,000 professionals that showed what were their biggest challenges as they were working from home. Collaboration, communication, loneliness, not being able to unplug. The reason I'm showing this too is for us to get our arms around what is it that we can actually do. How can we help our teams? How can we improve our teams? And so almost 60% of the negative responses in terms of what I'm struggling with and how I can be better have to do with collaboration, communication, this loneliness factor, and not being able to unplug. So I, as a leader leading my team, there are so many, I know that it's overwhelming. There are so many things you want to fix. We have supply chain challenges. There are stock out issues. There are things happening all the time. So the stress levels are high. You're managing a remote team. These are things you can get your arms around. So we're pointing out the problems that you think that you can get your hands around. Instead of trying to fix everything at once, we can focus on one or two things that we can try and work on in our business. One of the things that we discovered is that that I love to look at our roles and our responsibilities through the lens of maybe another business or another profession. I think another profession really helps. I often equate our business to the restaurant business and what we do. We can all get the restaurant business is an interesting analogy because they can all get food from the same producers, but it's what they do with the food that creates the distinct experience, from fine dining all the way to fast food. So that same analogy exists in our industry. Another interesting analogy to me is us as leaders moving forward is think of ourselves as conductors rather than coaches as we lead our teams. When you look at what the goal of a leader is leading a hybrid workforce, it's much like leading a beautiful symphony, right? We set the tempo. When you look at a conductor, what a conductor actually does, rather than stand up there and look cool and wave the baton, what a conductor actually does is set the tempo, the goals, the energy, and the intensity of the operation, of the experience, of the performance. So that's one thing the conductor does. Another thing that a conductor does is they unify the performers. So they attract pros, they train and promote teamwork, they fight against dissonance, and they create harmony. There was a great article on what a CEO actually does. And the number one thing a CEO does is recruit and retain top talent. The other thing was make sure there's enough cash in the bank. And the third is really to make sure everyone has the tools they need to get their job done. And a conductor, there's a lot of similarities here with unifying performers, attracting pros, and training your team. Number three, they listen critically. And this is probably one of those skills that you already have as a leader, otherwise you wouldn't be leading a team, but one that we have to fine tune our hearing instrument, if you will, to listening better to what's happening with our team, because a lot of that can't be expressed like it could be in person. So listening critically, prescriptive, intentional, treating each department, each section is important because it is. And then number four, guiding the outcome, of course, departmental individualized coaching, which become a really important step as we're trying to lead hybrid teams moving forward. Now, the three keys to make the work from home revolution work for you. Number one is the mindset and the will to make it work. Now, what I mean by that, a lot of us walked into this experience of managing a hybrid team with a bias, and we had a bias either for or against. And some of us were open to it, but our bias would change frequently. What was really interesting is the one study pointed out that 78% of HR leaders identified mindset as a greater challenge than skill set in driving the success of a hybrid workforce model. So mindset, it's really an attitude over aptitude experience. And this is what's fascinating about seeing the change that's happened. And the good news for us as leaders is that largely we have to be the ones that are willing to embrace this model, and to democratize the experience, whether you have a team that's in office or whether you have a team that's working remotely, is setting the stage for democratization and understanding that you embrace both equally. That's why the Quora CEO talked about, our headquarters will be in the cloud. He was trying to fight this internal uh, one-upmanship, if you will, over folks being in office versus out of office. A lot of us leading our teams has to do with our attitude about how we feel about remote work and how we need to change our own attitude. One of the studies even revealed that one of the best things a leader can do is actually work from home and prove to the team that that can be done. So I know that many of you are managing the hybrid model. Some of you are managing exclusively remote workers, and many of us are trying to figure out what our next step is in this. But I think this is encouraging news, is that it's largely our attitude, and that because we're smart entrepreneurial people, we'll figure out a way as we move along. Number two is performance KPIs, sales targets, and metrics. This is this sounds one of those things that is just simply stated and obvious, but it's really not, because I think in our business, we tend to set sales goals that might sound too large, too broad, too grandiose, and not fine-tuned enough. So for example, our goal might be to grow by 30%. I know I used to make this mistake all the time, but if we didn't have individual goals and departmental goals, nor could we measure progress made by our team members, then you really couldn't you really couldn't get your handle on what's going on. So it's been more important than ever before for us leading hybrid teams that we have actual performance goals, KPIs, sales targets, and metrics for every single department. One of the interesting things about an in-office team, I know when I was a distributor with Robin, some may not know that I was a distributor before. And one of the things that we had a metric for our warehouse team on number of packages that we could get out the door, because we did company store programs, and a lot of fulfillment and pick and pack. And everyone was measured in terms of the number of orders they could fulfill and the error rate. And the reason I'm bringing that up, that doesn't have as much to do with a hybrid model, except that it does have to do with performance metrics, that we needed a metric for every department. We needed some kind of way for us to be able to view objectively what was happening within our business in every single department. So I don't know what that is for you, but if there's a way you can get metrics around every department so that you can monitor and measure progress. Because number three, the most important one, and there's a lot of folks that are commonsku customers that are on this webinar now, you already have this, so it's not as vital for you, is just the oversight, is the ability to see what's happening in your business at all times. And, I know with the commonsku platform that enables that, to see the workflow, to see the projects in play, to see the collaboration, you can see what's going on in the business. The irony about work from home and the hybrid model is that those who have a bias against working from home, we tend to forget that even in office, we did not have transparency. Even though we could be literally, feet away from our coworkers, we really couldn't see into the work that was going on without the right systems. So two systems are important. The second point that I made about metrics is that's a system to run your business. That is the system that's very important for a hybrid model. But third is the system of oversight, making sure you have that oversight in your business. 4 tips for leaders. This is from Ray Chaudhry from an article in the Harvard Business Review. So 4 tips for leaders as we move forward. Number 1 is to support synchronous versus asynchronous communication. An example is Slack. That's supposedly an asynchronous communication tool, but it can become a synchronous communication tool. So it can be responding on your own time or responding real time. And we have to have a conversation about communication with our businesses, about how we can improve it, because that's the most important aspect that we've seen. At any given time, you look at what's happening. If you could pan out, look down at your business, and you could see Two employees are on a call with suppliers. We're trying to find maybe lost shipments. Somebody might be on a DM or some sort of private messaging with a customer going through a new project they're working on. 3 or 4 employees can be in the app working on a project as we're speaking. I mean, you just go down the list and you see how many communication devices your team is using. It's probably a good time for us to talk about communication with our team. So leading a team's knowing what I've researched so far about leading the hybrid model, one of the things I would look at is how our teams are communicating. Do we have too many communication tools? Do we narrow those down? Do we need to have a conversation about conversation? Do we need to make sure that everybody is on the same page in terms of synchronous versus asynchronous communication? A very minor example. If I'm going back to the study and I show that that our work hours have increased, that our after hours work have increased, and our collaboration has increased, one of the challenges we're going to have is when and how do we communicate? I know in our office, we had a little bit of an advantage because we already had a hybrid model in place. We had some folks in office, we had some folks out of office. A very simple thing has been communicating across time zones. And so in our office work culture, we have had to learn how to balance. We've learned how to balance communication with work lives and our colleagues' work lives. So I've learned, for example, not to ping my colleagues after hours through Slack, because can be this culture where you feel like you have this pressure to respond, rather than sort of respecting that time that they need, for their private life. So that's just one example, but communication, I think it's a great time to pause and have the talk about communication. Number 2, 4 tips is brainstorming and problem solving led initiatives, allowing ample time for the brainstorming problem solving to occur in your business, and making sure that you're allowing for enough opinions and the democratization of opinions with both your team that's offsite as well as onsite. Encouraging virtual socialization, team building, and mentoring. And then, of course, the one point, this was the point that Roy made, was that setting the example by being a work from employer yourself is one of the most important things. Work from anywhere, employ yourself is one of the most important things that you can do as a leader. One more thing, and this is from Google, and I just love the phrase, so I thought I would include it here, and that was collaboration equality. The ability to contribute equally regardless of location, role, experience level, language, and device preference is making sure that everyone in your organization has a voice, but also respecting that voice and then making sure they have an opportunity to express that voice in the projects and the things you're doing. It's more important than ever before is that we allow for collaboration, equality to thrive in our businesses. One episode I want to encourage you to check out at later is on the SKUcast. Check out episode 169, a conversation I had with Claudia St. John about managing a remote team. It's fantastic. Yeah, many of you know Claudia, and she does a really good job. Their own team has been remote basically since they started their business. So she has a lot of fantastic tips about this. This was recorded about mid-pandemic when many of us were just trying to figure things out. So check that out. Thank you, Allie, for throwing that in the chat. That's right there in the chat. Allie threw the link for the episode there. The other thing I wanted to point out, and this is just sort of an add-on to the presentation today, is check out the book Atomic Habits. I want to shift for just a second from us managing teams to us managing ourselves, because that's an interesting challenge that's happened for many of us too. James Clear said in the book Atomic Habits, we are limited by where our habits lead us. So just a few tips. I promised this when you registered that we would have this for you. And that is that in terms of our own personal productivity, no matter how productive we are, there's always room for improvement. Being available to all means effective to none. So we have to be sure that we manage that. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, working from home or working from anywhere, whatever it is managing yourself. We have to be kind of rude about unnecessary interruptions. Self-interruptions are actually our biggest enemy in terms of productivity. Turn off those social media notifications and useless desktop alerts. We live in a very, very busy world already. And in order for us to do deep and focused work, we have to focus on what's important for us and our team. Me first, you second. This sounds like contradictory advice, but using calendar blocking for big projects so you can stay on task. Remember the chart that we showed earlier was that collaboration has increased. And so in one sense, we have to be careful as colleague to colleague that we protect our productivity time. I know I saw that as someone who's already working in a hybrid model, working from home. Suddenly everybody was working from home, and we had more meetings, we had more collaboration, and that was great for our team, but also for productivity. It's something to watch, because that can get into big creative projects that you're working on. For distributors, that can be research projects. If you've got a big project for a client where you've got a dozen items that they're into, or you're launching a program or store, that's deep work. It requires that type of concentration. So use calendar blocking for that. Stick to your routine. Routines in your daily work. For those of us that are working from home, it's a ritual that creates a chain link of habits. There are others. Be honest with your team. Use time tracking apps. That's another tool. There are more of these we can post. We can share the post later when we send you the ebook as well. But there's one of my favorite tips is to quit working when your brain quits working, when you're working on a deep project. Set self goals and stay curious. We're going to share with everyone the Hybrid Workforce Series ebook that we just created. So we'll send that to everyone at the close of this, no later than tomorrow. And that's it. That's the presentation. Do we have any questions so far? I'm looking in the chat. I want to make sure we don't miss folks' questions. I want to invite Craig Dunlap back on the stage here as well.
Great job.
Hey,
Bobby.
Craig.
Hey, Bobby. How are you?
I'm great, man. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, that's great.
What are your thoughts, Craig? As we're going to get into this interview, but what are your thoughts as you look at some of those numbers and stats and some of the stuff that I presented there, like that research study of 10,000 professionals? That's a rich study.
Yeah, that's
what was your thoughts?
That's scary.
What was your thoughts as you were reading that?
Well, I can't say that I'm surprised, and I probably speak for others. Like we kind of feel that, don't we? So my first thought was it was a little bit validating, but kind of in a scary way. And selfishly, since we're kind of in the businesses in the we're in the business of trying to free up people's time. It's not like I like seeing that, but I understand that it's happening. I mean, too many people are just taking on too many things. Absolutely.
Yeah. I jumped right into a question. Let me introduce Craig to everybody real quick. Craig Dunlap is the founder and CEO of Delegate CX. It's an offshore services firm dedicated to helping businesses grow faster and smarter while improving their customer experience. And through his experience outsourcing at previous companies, he realized that much of what we do as a supply chain is consumed with business tasks that shift our attention away from client-focused growth. And because of that, he founded Delegate CX, experts who help business leaders discover ways to reduce their overhead, to drive process improvements in their operation, and effectively delegate. Now, many of you know Craig as the co-founder of Meyer Dunlap, Dallas-based promotional products and branded merchandise distributor with revenues over 10 million. He and his partner, I loved an episode that I recorded with you guys back in Vegas. Yeah. Like 2 years ago or something, like 3 years ago. It was in a Vegas hotel room. It was classic Kirk Meyer type interview too. I think he's in boxer shorts and black socks, and we're hanging out doing an interview on your business and everything. But many of you also know Craig, for those that went to SKU Camp in Pittsburgh. He presented this amazing presentation on productivity. And it was fantastic because he showed what he went through in their organization from time tracking. You tracked basically where you and your company spent your time. And I think every employee had to track time. Is that right, Craig?
That's right. That's right. We wanted to know exactly how much each project cost us.
Okay.
Not just supplier costs, but how much time and Mm-hmm.
That's phenomenal. And some would argue incredibly hard to do in our business, but it's doable. You did it. And what did that experience? I skipped the rest of the intro and just jumped right into asking questions because I'm excited about that topic. What did that teach you in terms of the projects and tasks that you see the average distributor? And you're in the category of progressive distributor. Mm-hmm. And so what did that teach you about the unnecessary tasks or the tasks that really aren't up to par in terms of our skill, or maybe I would say sales leading forward tasks? What did that teach you about the kind of things that are superfluous in our business?
Yeah, I think it kind of showed us a couple things. One was there are clients, and I spoke about this, at SKU Camp, but it essentially showed us there are clients we should not have that aren't a good fit for us.
Yeah,
and we need to change that. And there were probably more, well, just as important, there were tasks that are best employees. We had a great team. Our great team were doing that they shouldn't be doing, that anybody else could be doing, and they weren't able to do what we wanted, what they liked doing best and what they were best at, and was suitable for how much we were paying them, how much they could grow. So yeah, it was eye-opening, very eye-opening.
One of the, when it comes to managing hybrid workforce, now you had experience at this because one of the things that you did in your business was that the reason why you started your business is that you started doing offshoring yourself. You actually managed a team offshore. And so you were working in the hybrid model long before the pandemic came along. In terms of managing our teams better, one of the phrases I love that you shared with me is that now that many of us are managing part-time or full-time remote teams, as leaders, we must practice, and this is the phrase, exaggerated importance of business fundamentals. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, and pre this business, in Meyer Dunlap days, we for about 5 or 6 years were work from anywhere. Everybody who came on board, and it was a huge perk. It's the perk that everybody talked about, that was the most important. So we were big believers in remote work from a long time ago. But
Okay.
yeah, that exaggerated importance of business fundamentals was, what I mean by that is, all of the things that we as business leaders have learned and have read countless articles and, tips and ebooks and books and that sort of thing. All of those, when you go to that fast to a remote work experience, they just became hyper important, especially during COVID. Now, we never experienced anything like that before, obviously, but when it happened in a week, and all of a sudden, I think everybody realized you need to be strong in those business fundamentals. So very, very basically, think about your mission, vision, and values. Just in that week alone, when the world is falling out, and everybody's working remote, do you have a mission, vision, and values, and do you still believe in it? And do you still go back to those things as your core, as the rock that the business is built on? And if you've got that as a great starting place, then you can go to some of the other business fundamentals, like people. Just another example. Just think about people. Very, very basically, why do people generally leave a company? It's not necessarily because of money. It's because they don't feel valued, or they don't feel like there's going to be career advancement. So when you've now got this remote thing where you can't just go and to somebody's office and pat them on the back and talk through this, you've got to be very, very intentional about it. But the fundamental didn't change. That when we went to this hybrid or work from home only model, you've got to show your team that you value them. So that's essentially what I mean. You could take that to sales. You could take that to accounting. Just all the important parts, like you talked about in your presentation. The metrics. Did you have them before? Yeah. So have them again, and figure out how to communicate them again.
You and Kirk, did you guys change when you started managing more and more of a hybrid team? Were there things you changed in your leadership and how you functioned and what you did?
Yeah, it made us button up that we needed to be real strong with measurements, real strong with how we delegated things and processes and that sort of thing. Because when people first started using working from home on a regular basis, your first thought is, oh my goodness, they're just taking advantage of me and they're not working. Or how do I know that they're working? Or what kind of quality is out there? So it took us some kind of hard learning lessons to realize you've got to be strong in that fundamental of what is their job, what are they required to do, how are you measuring them, when are you going to get together, how are you going to get together, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of trial and error.
I love that, the practical tips around that. I think we initially saw this this surge in business leaders when work from home hit, And many of us, either some of us already had teams that were partially working from home, or most of us suddenly were thrown in this world. And we did some things fundamentally that changed our leadership style. So we changed maybe our weekly meeting. We changed the way the weekly meetings would happen, or we had more than weekly meetings, or we did, there were things we experimented with. And then I think we hit this lull toward into last year and toward this year. And now as we see business coming back, your comment about amplifying the business fundamentals is vital, I think, as we're moving forward, because now what we're going to have is hopefully everyone will experience this proliferation of business coming on. So we're going to have this new challenge ahead. Working together is something that, in terms of efficiency, is something you really focused on at Meyer Dunlap. What did you learn about helping your team work better together? One of the distributors that I love up in Vancouver said to me, this has been a hard model because you could have 70% of your team just doing fantastic, but 30% of your team could really be struggling. And that can impact obviously your overall production and productivity. Were there some practical things that you learned about helping achieve efficiency and helping teams work better together?
Yeah, what I'd say to this is I've always gone overboard on trying to be more efficient. And I've learned the hard way that that's not an infinite thing to try to achieve. There's a point where it's too much. And what I have experienced is really related to change. Change is just so hard. And when you're making an effort to be more efficient, you've got to understand and be empathetic to this change that you just know in your head is going to be the best change ever, that it has real impact on those who are having to actually put the change into place. And so you've got to recognize that. And, I know that I did a poor job of that during the pandemic, because everybody had to change everything all at once. And so you've got to understand how hard change can be to make. And so, where we had better, when we were ever trying to make a change for efficiency, we did not have success when we just heaped it on people, even if we knew it was going to save time. If we just said, hey, here's a great way to do it, you got to do it this way now. Never worked, will never work. Right. But when we were able to trial run it, maybe with one employee, or sit in a room and say, here's the change we're thinking about making. When we first went to a very, very heavy overseas outsourcing model, we did that one right, where we sat everybody in a room and said, this is what we're doing. We've kind of trialed this a little bit, but we're thinking about going really big with this. Everybody lay out your issues, give us your feedback, tell us all your concerns. And we were in one of the few times where we made changes where we actually listened. We did listen, and it made that change a whole lot better. So it's really just, you've got to get input. You've got to be empathetic when you go for one of those efficiency practices.
On that point, I think I have found, just being an employee, is that you help me understand the why. Yeah. And then I'm going to highly activate and amplify the how. I'm going to help with the how. If it's just, here's the how that we're changing, and without enough of the why, then that feels like drudgery, and it feels like I don't understand completely. Right. You mentioned this. This was going to be our next topic anyways, was embracing the worldwide office. So you didn't just outsource, you went offshore. And something that's really broke open this past year for us as leaders is now we have the ability to hire talent from anywhere. So it's going to be amazing to see what's happening in the job market in the next 12 to 18 months. The virtual office now expands our ability to hire worldwide talent, not just North American talent, but worldwide talent. You experienced this at Meyer Dunlap as you outsourced over specifically, I think, to the Philippines, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. What led you to doing that? I mean, we can surmise it had to do with a lot of these efficiency changes, but what led you to do it? And then what were some of those things, an example of what you were outsourcing?
Yeah, what led us to do it is we had enough of saying growth is a good problem to have. You say that, you go win a big client, it's like, yeah, we're growing, it's a good problem to have. And it's just, life is too short to be bringing on problems. And so we said, we're not going to have that anymore. So, we want growth, and it's not a good problem to have. It's good. Growth is good. We didn't want it to wreck our lives. So what happened was, and I think I probably speak for most distributors, anytime we grew, we got all this work. It might be enough to hire somebody to fill it, but we already have really good people. We wish we could give it to those good people, because maybe we went to the meeting and said, here's who your person was going to be, knowing that maybe they weren't going to be able to work on it because they didn't have enough time. We ran into that over and over and over. So, I can't even remember how I stumbled upon it, but just said, there's got to be a better option for this, and started slowly, using offshore talent. It was a lower cost, obviously. And it allowed us to be very flexible. We could hire up or hire down, trial run it, right off the bat. And we were, so we just started off really small, and we took a few tasks that we suspected we could outsource and people could handle. We made sure that it was successful, and it kind of took off from there. We almost instantly saw these great employees that we had here have all sorts of time on their hands, to go to happy hours, to call on more people, to sell, to be proactive. So, we saw the fruit of it very, very quickly. It's great.
Yeah. I think I could tie something Danny just mentioned in the chat to what you just said, and that is this whole idea of bigger is better. It is a misnomer, I think, that we've all battled and found out in our industry. I'll never forget our customer service manager standing in my office one day and say, I'm saying, I don't think I've made this much money before, and I don't know that I ever want to do it again, because of that kind of great growth, But I love what Danny said. Different, bigger is better is the way we've all lived for a long time. Different is better. And that's kind of what you did with this, is this shift that you made was different. And I think we have erroneous ideas about what offshoring means, what managing an offshore team means, because these became Meyer Dunlap employees. Was that right?
Yeah, we were using a service, but we went into the program saying they might be employed by somebody else, but they are our team. They still are our team. They are team members. We are celebrating birthdays and anniversaries and
Cool.
that sort of thing. Yeah. So
you were trying to liberate your team, obviously, to do more selling and more creative work. What kinds of tasks did you see your team burdened with, like specifically? And maybe you can break that down by sales or ops, but what specific things? I think it's a big question folks have. They might say, well, that's great for you guys. We can't really offshore because we require everyone to do this, but what kinds of things were you doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I often challenge people in the industry a whole lot with this, that the mindset needs to change a little bit. The first thing I always say is start with the premise, not necessarily of what we can outsource, but start with the premise of like what you and only you or your leaders or your salespeople, really, let's start to talk about salespeople. What should a salesperson, what can they only do, and what should they be doing? They should only be selling, only be selling. Now, obviously we know that's not, that's kind of the maybe a pipe dream, but that's the goal. The end goal is to get them selling and only selling. So anything that is not sales, that a salesperson is doing, you should be kicking yourself that they're doing that. So, and we told our team the same thing. So, we were asking salespeople, why did you just call that supplier to check inventory? The supplier isn't a client. That's not sales. Why did you spend 4 hours on Sage doing, researching products? That's not sales. You went to a happy hour today. That's sales. Do more of that. Do that over and over and over.
Right.
All 20 clients. That's sales. Protect that time above all else. And so what we found after we kind of did this is, hey, I just ordered samples. Okay, well, let's get somebody else to order samples. Let's get somebody else to put that presentation together. You can approve it and send it along to the client, but why are you going and pulling those 20 products that you pulled for three other presentations. Like, why are you spending 2 or 3 hours? Product research in this business is a sales killer. It's just a
Yeah.
killer, and we all know it, and we all want to be more proactive. But I don't think that we push ourselves enough to say somebody else can do that. And wow, I just multiplied how many more sales calls I can make. I just blew this thing up. That was that, to Danny's point. I mean, that was the different is better for moment for us.
Yeah. Well, outsourcing can take place in so many different ways, in so many different places. So why are you a proponent of offshore, overseas outsourcing despite time zone differences, language barriers? I mean, there are these basic concerns we have at first when we think about doing this. What are concerns about quality? What was your experience?
Yeah, and those are very legitimate questions. We get them all the time. The time zone thing is actually not as much of a problem as it might sound, mainly because, well, in the Philippines, and there are other places like India, these are some of the biggest industries in those countries.
Yeah.
So the talent pool knows that they're going to be working either night shifts or modified night day shifts. So that turns out to not be a problem. The language barrier we get asked, that's like basically the first question. And I say it a couple ways. One is, in most of these places, they're learning English as I call it a first and a half language. They're learning it from day one. They have an accent, but they're learning it for day one. So they're fluent. The other thing I challenge the clients on is, you're concerned about the accent. Maybe that's rooted in, you don't want them speaking to clients. Well, think about how much of your day you actually spend talking to clients. There are 1,000 other things that you do during a day that is not client focused, and get those off your plate, so you can spend more time talking to clients. And then you build up a comfort level. It's like, yeah, they've got an accent, but they know how to track an order. Let's get them in front of a client because they know how to call a supplier and say, get this thing back online. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I also think we have these built-in biases that we have. I mean, the world is truly flat. I mean, last year we talk about the flat world, and last year was really threw us into that experience. I remember I was in Manila probably 15 years ago and talking to a banker there who was talking about the rising middle class. This was 15 years ago, about the rising middle class there. And I just so much respect for folks that can learn. English is this is a random thought, but English is one of the hardest languages to learn. And for folks that can do that and learn our business at the same time is just phenomenal to me, because I couldn't learn Tagalog. I think that's the name of I couldn't do that. But
one thing I would add to that real quick is kind of like why overseas for us. I didn't fully answer your question, was that especially in this industry, there are a lot of people who don't necessarily want to do that product research in their 10th to 15th year. They want career advancement. They want to try something new and unique, and it's just a really unique way to allow that to happen. Maybe you're not ready to hire a full-time person, so let's get somebody on that's a lower cost, and have the people here manage them. Everybody knows it's work from anywhere at this point. What's the difference in where they are, and you get a chance to manage, build up that skill, offload tasks that you don't want to do. So.
Yeah. One of the most important aspects of this applies to whether you're outsourcing, offshoring, whatever you want to call it, to India or wherever, or whether you're just hiring North American employees, is the fact that we don't really have a lot of documented processes in our business. We don't really spend the time to do it. The systems that run our business are actually are more than, and I'm speaking more than software. Just like, when we get up to go to work, the way we get to go to work, shower, coffee, work, that's a system. That system gets us ready for work. So these systems that we have that power our business, from our processes, though, they're more complex, but a lot of us don't have these written down. Since we have these many systems, what practical steps have you encouraged folks in terms of documentation? Because that's something you said is a natural step, is that if you got documented processes down and it's not walking around in your head, then that's something you can translate a whole lot better, whether you're managing a hybrid force in North America only or whether it's overseas. How and what do you recommend as best practice in terms of documenting those?
Yeah, I love that question. You may have put some to sleep, because when people hear process documentation, they say, "Oh, this is terrible." But
Oh no.
I'll say, this is I'm nerdy passionate about it. I think that this is the biggest component of our industry that business leaders are missing. And you know, you everybody wants to scale in this business, and it's a really hard business to scale because it's so customized. Going back to kind of your food example, it's like, you can do so many different things with the food, but it's so important to document those processes to be able to scale, to take, to go from 2 million to 10 million. You have got to be able to let other people do it. So the question is a great one. Very simply how we always did it, because people don't want to document their own processes, because it doubles the time that it takes to like write it up. And it's just painful, understandably painful. So what we did is we get people in a conference room. We'd block out a time, block out an hour, and say, hey, today we're going to document how we order samples. And you had to get somebody else in there with you. And one person would come in with 3 to 4 examples of a client requesting samples. And the other person would sit there and watch that first person perform that task, ordering samples. And they literally would just write down the steps. And I know that sounds, I'm trying to, we went through so many different ways, and that was the simplest way to do it. You have, yes, it takes 2 people, but you don't have to sit there and go back and forth and type it up. And somebody else gets to ask the questions of, wait, hold on, that's, are you sure that's how you do it? Or what happens if this happens? And so it really is that simple. You just have to be disciplined to stick to the schedule, block out a couple hours a week, and just treat that meeting as important as a client meeting, and you'll be able to, document.
I love that. That's the most practical way I've ever heard documenting processes. Because I know with my team in the past, the way I would manage my team, it was when I would ask folks to do it, you could feel that pain. Like they're just, oh no, I've got to go through all of this, that's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, very, very selfishly, that is kind of what I am building this new business on. I said, gosh, this offshoring thing was tough. If we want to have other clients do the same thing that I did, because I documented all of our processes, we need to have people who actually are that person, and they sit and we screen record all of our clients' processes, and we document it for them. And I know it's self-serving, but that I understand that pain. That pain is real, and you don't get documented processes because of that.
Well, I think it's vital for entrepreneurs in this business, because often what can happen, you've heard these horror stories before where an owner loses track of their business, and you have a couple of key personalities that are carrying everything around in their head, and they tend to, if they get in a bad way or in a bad situation, you can hold that business hostage to some degree. That's a dramatic statement, but it can be the case, as opposed to, and that's the negative. The positive is once you get these processes documented, it just makes hiring a whole lot easier. It makes onboarding especially a whole lot easier. Andrew had a great question about security. How do you handle things when you're offshoring or outsourcing, such as billing clients, invoicing, delicate issues like, these are my clients, here's, whatever it might be. What types of security protections do you put in place?
Yeah, I mean, so from our business, Delegate CX, I mean, we have all sorts of security, and we're HIPAA compliant and, kind of obsessive about it. But as you're looking at it, as I think back to my Meyer Dunlap days, as we looked at it, we were really, really slow to pass over tasks that might have data security issues. We wouldn't do it until we knew that the proper controls are in place. So, if people ask us to do accounting work for them, one of the very first questions we ask is, okay, who's the controller? Who is the one that is going to make sure that a control is in place? And that doesn't matter where they're located. You just shouldn't have the person who's cutting checks also do the bank reconciliation. Simple stuff. So whenever we're documenting accounting processes or data, important or secure processes, we're always asking, okay, what's the control on this? What's the control that only the right eyes see this, and only the right eyes can act on certain parts of it? So that's just something that you just got to ask yourself on those, even now. Forget outsourcing.
Yeah, true. it's rare when we get someone who's like an expert, and I don't even like this phrase, but back office management, right? Accounting, order processing, all of those efficiencies. It's really rare because we have a lot of folks, we have a sales entrepreneur type that leads our businesses mostly, but our business is so complex and it's built around these order processing efficiencies or lack thereof. How have you seen systems in terms of that impact, prohibit growth or fuel growth?
Yeah, I go back to kind of what I said earlier is like the number one question sales related in this industry is, man, I wish I was more proactive. Number one comment,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
just so much of that. We go to these industry specific sales conferences or, PPA education before, and it's like, you got to be more proactive. Yeah, I know. And how?
Right.
So that, not having good systems in place, that is the number one, that's what it kills first, is it kills proactivity, because you've got to be reactive. You've got to handle the orders that have come in, and you push the proactivity aside if you don't have those back office systems.
What did you see in terms of a transition from managing a team solely in Dallas or solely in the US to offshoring and outsourcing? Once you start to outsource some of these other activities that didn't have to do with client-facing activities, what did you as a leader see a change in what you spent time on? Because the question I had originally was, so what should we as owners be spending time on now? But I'm kind of curious what you saw in terms of where you and Kirk were able to focus once you actually made that shift.
The first thing what we were able to focus on was just longer term planning. Thinking,
Yeah.
down the road. What do I, what should people be spending time on once they do free up some time with that? I just scream it from the rooftops: leadership, leadership, leadership. You most of the distributor owners, you didn't get into it to be doing sage presentations at this stage in the game, and
Right.
you need to be focusing on that leadership aspect of it. I, as soon as I started getting time, I ran into this article in the Harvard Business Review, and I printed it out. It had like the six keys to what all good leaders do, and I had it on my desk. And it, once I freed up time, it allowed me to look at that every day and say, am I shaping a vision? Am I translating that vision into strategy? Am I recruiting the best talent? Am I focusing on measurable results? I had bandwidth to actually think about that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. All the stuff you want to, and you
yep,
need to, but you don't
yep.
have the time to. Well, I'd love to take advantage of your experience, both in ops and sales. And so you have seen the business. We both went through the 2008 recession. You've seen a lot of changes in the industry as you're looking at the business. You mentioned to me personalizing sales and customizing your offering as two of the important aspects. I asked you when we were talking earlier, what you would change moving forward in your business. So shifting to sales focus, what did you mean by that? As we're looking at the year ahead and what might be transpiring, where can we focus our sales energy?
Yeah. Great question. There's nobody in the industry that I think sells better than Common SKU, and Common SKU doesn't sell us. We haven't mentioned Common SKU technology in this webinar. You never mention it in podcasts. You don't. I went the first SKU con I went to. I'm like, are they gonna sell me? What
Right.
happened? And
Right.
it was broad, the topics, but they were absolutely customized to me and they were personalized to me. Y'all weren't saying my name, but you were hitting home with every bit of content that you had. And I think that the sales world has kind of flipped into that. We just fully expect you, that whoever we're buying from, to bring value outside of just the product that you have. Bring value
Yeah.
and so that's it. What y'all are doing. I mean, I tell our salespeople at Meyer Dunlap, I told them for 5 years that is how we need to be selling, over
Yeah.
and over and over.
We've got 5 minutes left. Just so far, by the way, thank you, Craig, for that. Well, we got 5 minutes left. And if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We've got just a few more I have for you. And a lot of this has to do with just taking advantage of your experience overall, not just with outsourcing and offshoring, but business planning. Can you give us a glimpse into how you and Kirk would do business planning? Annual goals, reviewed by quarter, sales and profit picture. What did that look like as a leader?
Yeah,
business planning?
we set annual goals, but it was more of a hey, let's go celebrate if we get this. I'm of the mindset to a large degree that you just, it's almost too far out. That's a fun one to kind of strive for, but you don't do too much planning around that. Those quarterly goals are so important, and they're going to be based around the annual goals, but they're much more of the focus than annual. And then within that, you got to break those quarterly goals down into 1 or 2 week to-dos that everybody can hold each other accountable on. And you got to revisit it. The biggest thing that always hit us was flat out just, you got to have your quarterly meeting, and the time that you cancel it, that's going to mean a bad quarter, maybe not sales wise, but just like things just start spinning around. So it's really kind of back to that fundamentals, the discipline of meeting. You got to have your leadership team, and you got to put together those quarterly goals that you strive on. And
I love that. Otherwise, it's funny looking at annual goals only. It's like trying to hit a hole in one as opposed to, actually trying to get to the pin. We don't have any other questions in the chat. Craig, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you joining us for this hybrid workforce webinar, because I knew it was important for us to talk about the challenges that we have, but I also knew it was important for us to consider shaping the new office going forward. I'll let you have the last word on this. As we look at moving our teams forward and changing the infrastructure of our business, what final tips for leaders would you have for them as they look at reshaping their teams and managing a hybrid workforce? Any final word?
I could probably pick a bunch of different stuff. What comes to mind is based on your charts of how much we're working, set aside time, me time, alone time. Make sure your team does as well. Respect that. Have them take vacations, as painful as that may be. You got to recharge. So.
Yeah. Craig, thank you so much.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Well, thank you so much, Craig. I know as talk about a productivity expert. I mean, your SKU Camp presentation, which you can still find out at community.commonsku.com, is one of my favorite presentations of all time, because it went through not only your challenges as a business, but you talked about how you are so passionate about personal productivity too, and some of the things that you were doing to even strive toward personal productivity. So thanks for that last tip, and thanks for joining us. Don't forget to check out Delegate CX online. Craig, I think it's delegatecx.com.
Very easy.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And thank you, my friend. It was an honor to have you
here.
Thanks
for having me. And I think I speak for everyone. Thanks to commonsku. I mean, y'all are elevating the industry to great heights. It's really awesome.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Thanks everyone for attending. Appreciate you showing up. Thank you for your friendship, and I hope you guys have a great day.